Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Guerrilla Film Fest in this producers panel. Thanks to Guerrilla for hosting us and partnering with Action Studios. I'm Andy, a graduating senior this semester. At Action Studios, we're a startup production company doing mostly commercial content, social media management, and high concept narrative. And we're super excited to partner with Guerrilla. Make sure you join the mixer later this afternoon at 1 p.m. to meet with other festival goers. But right now, we get to hear from a really awesome slate of producers. Kate got these guys on board, and this is just a space for us to share about lessons learned, qualities of a successful producer, share some tips and advice and warnings, perhaps. So I'd love to just get us going with your stories, because it's one of my favorite parts of these sorts of things, just hearing about everyone's journey, because it's so different in this industry. So if you could just start off with who you are, maybe the first thing that hooked you into film and storytelling, and then where that's taking you since, like the short 2 to 3 minute synopsis. Bruce, would you want to go first?
Hi, I'm Bruce Nahan. I guest lectured a bunch at Biola. I guess that's why I'm here. I got my start driving Jane Fonda around 1975. Opened a nightclub called Chippendales in 76. A record company called Death Row in 92. And then for some reason, the LA County Film Commissioner thought I'd be a perfect film commissioner. So somehow I became a film commissioner for the North LA County, that Santa Clarita, Palmdale, Lancaster, etc. I discovered I love working with indie filmmakers. I got a law degree, so that helps. Yeah, I love guest lecturing. I love mentoring, and it's good to be here today.
Yeah, thanks. Bruce, what are you doing now? Like, what's the current day-to-day look like for you?
I generally spin about 30 movies a year, whether I'm doing co-producing or business affairs or distribution or acquisition, but primarily my day-to-day is co-producing with young filmmakers who have a great passion project but haven't a clue about how to make a movie from the logistical point of view. So I do co-producing a lot of executive producing, about 30
That's
films
awesome.
a year, give or take.
That's great. Mark, what about you? And Mark, you come from the casting side of things, right?
Yeah, I'm a casting director. I started in New York in the 80s and worked with a lot of great, wonderful, innovative commercial casting directors in New York. And then at the same time, I also would like help Milos Forman on his screen tests. And after I did that, I was like, I want to work more in film and TV, but back then there was very little production in New York. So I moved to Los Angeles and started from the very beginning. I was the casting assistant on Divorce Court, and you cannot get any lower than that. I later found out that I did the work of two different people. It was budgeted for two assistants. I stayed really late, did the work, and later was told, oh, yeah, we pocketed the other half of the money and just had you. But that was basically, it taught me how to get ahead in the entertainment industry, which is work like a dog, have a brain in your head. Don't sit there and tap your watch and say, I have something to do, I have to leave. So basically get the job done and be committed to the work, and just sort of worked my way up to casting director. And then after years of working in casting, from the movie The Mask, the TV shows Beverly Hills, 90210, Babylon 5, and then, sort of indie films, a lot of indie films. I started working with a Canadian producer, director, writer named Joan Carwigan, and that was really where I got my first co-executive producer credit. And it was really from my contributions from the very beginning of a project in casting before it's officially greenlit. And I think that that's what I really bring to the table. And at the current moment, I have a movie coming out still. I have one that's out right now called Getting to Know You. And then I have another movie coming out soon called that I with both of these are with Joan Carwigan, and then another one called A Grand Romantic Gesture. And basically I continue to be a casting consultant for her.
Awesome. Josh, you're on the top of my screen. Thanks.
Yeah, trying to think the most salient way to say how I got here. I head up the immersive and interactive department for Viola Davis and her husband Julius Tennant's production company, JV Productions. So basically anything that doesn't fit nice and neatly into a feature or series falls in my lap. So it's VR projects, augmented reality, location-based experiences, video games, short form digital stuff, branching narrative. And it's fun, keeps me on my toes. I've always loved technology. I've always loved storytelling. I started in the PA route, worked at a studio in Seattle where I grew up for a while, learned the ropes of just like what it meant to be a PA, worked with an incredible producer named Samantha Hausman on several films with her, and got to see sort of the inside of the machines. The first feature was Captain Fantastic that I worked on as a PA with her. And that gave me the crazy idea. I worked on that film my junior year, going into my senior year, and my good friend Annalise Franklin, also Biola grad, Hannah Chu, a bunch of other incredible human beings decided that we were going to be crazy enough to try to make a feature film while still being students. We had no idea what we're doing, and we're so grateful for Bruce coming in, helping us figure out logistically as an EP, just what it looks like to, just when it comes to like private equity, film financing, learning the ropes that way. And that equipped me really well to get to the job that I have currently, because when I was putting documents together for the first VR project that I did, I drew on a lot of the experience of sort of figuring it all out with Trial by Fire through Aventura, which was the film that we did as Biolans. And I think that summarizes me.
Thanks. Yeah, Annalise is my 558 mentor, and I did a similar thing doing a feature sophomore, junior year. It was ridiculous.
Oh my gosh.
Should have done it differently.
We had so much fun. This was the first Biola feature. And we had to open all sorts of floodgates because the administration didn't know what to do with a feature. And we created LLCs, and Josh sold shares, and that confused them a little more. But we got through it. We had a great time, Annalise, Josh, I, and some of the rest of your alumni. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know doing that when I did it just felt like diving into the deep end. That was the best way to learn. It's crazy. Paul, what about your journey here?
Yeah, so I'm also a Biola grad, 2013. And so after school, I didn't really have like a financial safety net or anything like that. So I was sleeping on floors, PA, and then just kind of being wild. And so I kind of like, I did like I did one PA gig on like a music video, and then I had kind of been talking like, oh yeah, I produced while I was in college, that kind of thing. And then the guy was like, oh hey, could you coordinate for me? So I was like, hey everybody, what's coordinating exactly? Because we, in school you learn sort of broadly, because it doesn't really make sense to learn like the nickels and dimes of everything until you're actually doing it. So I didn't know functionally what that meant. But I really cut my teeth on a bunch of like low budget, wouldn't recommend anybody work on them kind of music videos, and just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. The guy was a little bit younger too, actually, the EP that was kind of getting the music video. So he didn't totally know what he was doing either. So we were kind of like, okay, shoot, we have $10,000. Is that enough? I don't know, hire you, call this guy. So it was pretty hands-on. And then I knew, so pretty quickly I was producing for him, but smaller budgets, that kind of a thing. And then I knew that I needed some mentorship, because I was just I was at the top of a low level weird thing where I kind of wanted to make sure that I was, learning the ropes correctly. And so I took more like coordinating gigs for a while on commercials. And so that was a helpful way to be under somebody that kind of understood the like managerial, organizational aspects, work my way up to PM. And then I'm mostly line producing now. And I still do music adjacent stuff where there's like a big concert company called Silent Partners and Silent House, and they do, so we work with like Selena Gomez, like Katy Perry, Taylor Swift, I don't know, bunch of big pop stars. And so I produce a lot of content for them, and you know, we take them out to the desert, we film them, you know, talking maybe or shooting like a music video type thing. But kind of like there's a certain level where it's like, oh, okay, this is, because music videos have a bad rap in the industry just for not having enough money for a huge creative deal. So these are a little bigger, and so it's not like, oh, can you work for not enough, you know? Everybody's paid, everybody's fed, we're good. So that's kind of what I'm doing now.
Fantastic. And Evan.
Yeah, Paul, whatever musicians you just mentioned, I never heard of them, but I'm sure one of these days you'll be able to work with someone that's really notable. Man, my story, geez, I don't even know where to start, but I missed 2 months of my last semester at Biola because I was in Louisiana working on a movie called The Butler, which was that Oprah Winfrey, Forrest Whitaker movie. And so that was kind of like my first thing. And then I just, was doing Biola schoolwork and Bible stuff and whatever I needed to do from a producer trailer on set in Louisiana. I was there for 4 months, and I missed the first 2 months of my last semester at Biola in 2012. And then that movie was independently financed and put together by this, all the financing was put together by a guy named Cassian Elways, who kind of invented he's one of the co-claimers to inventing the independent film finance model, at least the foreign pre-sale kind of route. And so with the tax credit and the equity making up the 3 different tranches. And so after I came back from that, I kind of thought that I had already made myself a little spot in the business, and that was not the case. So I was just running around, just trying to figure out, okay, what's the next step, and searching for the next wave. And was driving a wardrobe truck for Bud Light commercials for a minute, and then Best Buy commercials with 3 a.m. call times and just like crappy PA stuff that I hated. And then I was able to hop over to Cassian Elwes' office in 2014, beginning of 2014, and then I worked with him for then 6 years through 2020, through 2019, 2014 and 2019. And then we did a bunch of different movies together. I was a producer, or an associate producer on a movie called Mudbound, which is nominated for 4 Oscars. And then a bunch of just like other weird stuff. A movie called Winter Boys Club with Kevin Spacey and Ansel Elgort, Emma Roberts, and Taron Egerton. That went straight to VOD. I was an associate producer on this movie called Elvis and Nixon, which was Amazon's very first movie they released in 2015 with Kevin Spacey and Michael Shannon. And then kind of had my hands in just like a bunch of little movies. A movie called J.T. Leroy with Kristen Stewart and Laura Dern. And then the last movie that I worked on there was a movie called The Last Thing He Wanted, which was Dee Reese's next movie after Mudbound with Ben Affleck and Anne Hathaway. And I worked in like a developmental capacity there. But because of Zika, I did not go to Puerto Rico because the juice wasn't worth the squeeze for me at that point. So anyway, that was that. And then after end of 2019, I jumped and then started my own little thing called Between Friends Pictures. And my partners in that are Delaney Buffett, who's a writer-director that's rep by CA and Mosaic, and then her writing partner, Katie Corwin, and then musician, entrepreneur, Jimmy Buffett. That's the 4 of us. So that is it. I have no idea what I'm doing and just failing upwards like the rest of us.
Yeah, I feel like every new project, we have to start from scratch.
I just want to follow up on Evan. So you worked on The Butler. I worked with, but I was always getting phone calls from Lee Daniels when he was a manager. And the first thing I want to say about him is
he's crazy.
He has the best taste in actors. He just
Yeah,
had
he
the
does.
absolute best taste in actors. And because of that, we had to forgive him everything else. You know, it was like, whatever it was, we just had to
Yeah.
go, yes, Lee, I'll see them. And just because he had really good taste in actors.
Yeah, he keeps you on your toes without a doubt.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't know. He's not he's when it comes to talent and actors, that's kind of his strong suit. He doesn't like looking at dollar signs and numbers and always just kind of says, figure it out. But that's the thing. Like it was kind of the first lesson for me. Is like that was the first movie I worked on, and it was you know a $30 million picture. It was pretty big with 4 Oscar winners in it. But it was this like wild thing of just realizing, wow, the best directors are as uncompromising as possible. And that's the best way I can explain Lee. He was very uncompromising on certain things, knew what he wanted, and was unwilling to bend on things, and rightfully so. I mean, it's a kind of a producer's nightmare at times, but the stuff that he turns out, obviously, I don't know. I mean, look at Andrew Day and just understand, oh, yeah, I get it.
So for Evan or for any of you, how do you enable creatives like that who are so demanding? Like how are there specific ways you like to support your creatives on projects?
On projects I work on, I try and give them the liberality within the budgets. Oftentimes I'll tell them, if you want to do this, then you can't do that because there's a finite pie. And you compromise and you talk, and okay, he's not going to have this 360 camera because he needs to have a 2,000 piece orchestra. So you balance things out, you know. Evan may have it different because he's been with some really large people with large demands. I generally work in the indie space with limited budgets.
That's always a tough one. It's you want the creator to create, and there's a reason why they're the ones that are calling action, and you know you're basically putting their mind on screen. So it's definitely, I think, a difficult balance of trying to keep things within the parameters of the budget, but also allowing them to create. And yeah, like Bruce was saying, I mean, I've never worked on a studio picture. I think Butler, the rights were with Sony or Columbia. They gave it back to us once Laura Ziskin passed away, and then basically gave us the rights and turn around, and then we had to independently finance it instead of getting the money from Columbia. So that was how Butler came together. But I was also an assistant at that point, so I was just, I don't know, watching the proverbial shit hit the fan day after day, and hot costs just go through the roof every single day, and just producers freaking out, and the bond company stepping in a few times. And
on Butler?
Yeah. I don't know how much I'm supposed to say this.
I don't feel alone.
Yeah. So it obviously it didn't get to a point where it was out of control, but there was a handful of, I think, mid-shoot raises that were going on during the Butler. But that was, I mean, it was, I think, a joy for me because none of it was my reputation. None of it was my career that was on the line, watching that happen. And then just watching you know, the house catch on fire every day and get put out every day was, for me, just like an incredible experience. I was like, you can't pay for this kind of education, especially in such a risk-free environment, for me at least. But yeah, I think just trying to find a way to let them create. And I was told kind of earlier on by like a producer is obviously try and keep things contained, but don't get in the sandbox. Like, they're the creators. Like, don't try and change their mind. But like Bruce was saying, I mean, I worked on this movie called, I think it was originally called The Brits Are Coming. Now it's called The Con Is On, in a very limited capacity. Didn't take credit on it, but it was with Uma Thurman and Sofia Vergara. And there was a big plane scene that took place in an airport, and that was working with the director of, okay, is there anything else we can do cheaper instead of renting an airport for this scene? Because it's just a conversation. And I think we landed on a limo ride and just renting a limo and just doing, you know, trays and camera that way. And so I think there's definitely trade-offs, things that you can do, but doing everything you can to try and give them everything they want, but maybe it's 90%, but I don't know.
I mean, I think it's always just there's a conversation that's being had, because I mean, I do a lot of short-term productions, like a commercial, it comes up, maybe I'm on like a month ahead or something like that, and then we're only shooting for 3 or 4 days. So sometimes in those conversations, it's like, okay, I'll get you next time. So it's not a feature where like everything's riding on like, I really need that in the film. It's like, well, okay, so we'll get you the really fancy location, but maybe I get you the 2 techno cranes on the next one we got. So I don't know. It does depend. I think in the quick world of short-term productions, I have a little more leeway because it's a conversation, or maybe we're going so fast. It's like that week, it's like I actually physically can't. But I will say, I always prefer to start with, you have to have just like a solution-based mindset. Don't be a naysayer just because you're the producer, just because you're like working with you need to be working with the creative, not just like against it, you know? So it's usually, I try and say, if I can't say yes immediately, then I need to go do some research, you know, because there might be a way to figure something out, or a relationship that's already been made or something like that. So just throwing that out there.
To me, it's always just a balance between giving the director what he wants without spending all of my investors' money on certain items. And if he wants one thing, we talk about other scenes that he wanted things, and maybe he wants to shoot 16 hours today. And I said, well, if you're going to do 16 hours today, then we can't spend the money here. And, you know, most people have to balance the home budgets. And when you really talk to them calmly, generally they get the idea they can't have the 2 techno cranes if they're going to have something else. And they got to pick which one they're going to pay. But I let them make the choice. That gives them, like Evan was saying, the control, because they get to decide which one they're going to have and which one they're going to do without. I don't
Josh,
make
how does that play out
decision.
for? No, that's great. Josh, how does that play out for you in the VR space and these new frontiers that you guys are exploring?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think of the March, which we most recently did with Time Magazine, which is a very ambitious, very big budget recreation of the March on Washington, bringing Dr. King as a fully virtualized digital human. I think working with the creatives there, and then also with another project that we did with Oculus called Operation Othello, where we were creating bleeding edge new volumetric capture technology that scans in actors like holographically, so you could like walk around the performances. It's completely different tools and skills and canvases than what traditional creators are used to. So a lot of it is sort of being the translator and conduit. And I think that's, I think for producers in general, we're really served well when we're able to communicate an understanding of what the creative is and what you're going for. And then being able to explain sort of, I try never to give a no without 3 other really great options that are going for the same effect that, you know, so if it's like the techno crane example, it's like, well, maybe there's another, you know, what's the desired effect? What's the desired impression or experience for that user? And then how do we backtrack from there? But it's a lot of, it's a lot of educational work. And I think for me specifically, it's been really helpful for me to sort of go into like, and this I don't think necessarily relates for producing writ large, but for me, it's really helpful to have as much pre-visualization as possible where you can give examples. So if you're pitching like, oh, maybe we can do X, Y, and Z, being able to communicate, well, what does that look like? What does that do for the creative has been really valuable, I think, in the past. So it's been like working with storyboard artists, with previs artists, and just trying to help figure out, you know, what tools are. If I like Evan's analogy, and I think the sandbox is good. And if I see like the producing position is really the constructor of the sandbox, you're creating the parameters with the given resources and materials. And it's your job to make that sandbox as fun as possible with what tools that you have. And I think if you're able to lead a process that is delightful and joyful, then I think that connects to the product as well.
What a brilliant analogy, Josh. Evan.
I stole it from
like
Evan.
that.
No, I feel
It's
like
now part of my guest selection.
the next one.
I might have stolen that from you, Bruce.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think Josh is obviously like VR and stuff, but in my mind, his whole career is giving everything possible within a budget. So I feel like he's the final say on all of this, where it's the idea of, I don't know, like Josh and I have talked in the past about the future of film and what it looks like, and sound stages and whatever, and using Unreal Engine and all these things. I mean, I feel like in its purest form, that's Josh finding ways to give absolutely everything possible and shooting in the Sahara Desert while in Los Angeles or whatever.
Yeah.
So in my mind, it is, yeah, I don't see Josh as just a VR guy. He is the future film guy and what the film business and TV business will look like within the next 3 months to 30 years.
It actually jumps to a question I wanted to ask you all, and because producing can be such a nebulous, mysterious thing sometimes, like how do you explain to that cousin who's like not in film, a sentence, what your job really is? Like, what is producing defined as for you?
I think I'm the general contractor of the building. If I'm trying to explain to somebody in Iowa what I do, I hire the pieces, bring in the equipment.
Yeah, for me, I usually just tell people that I hire people, I make the budget, and then I just make sure that everything happens. I think actually, like, sometimes like an event planner is a good thing. Like, people have weddings, so that sometimes that's a little bit like, I mean, you could maybe do it yourself, but it might not turn out pretty. So it's kind of, I mean, I'll probably do mine myself, but I do producing, so it'll be all right.
I wanted to add, with regard to the producers, how they work with the directors. I've also worked with producers, and I've heard stories from other casting directors who've worked with producers who have more power than the director, and that happens. And when you're another person in that creative group, you sort of have to sort of sense how to work, try to fulfill the filmmaker's vision, while at the same time understanding the power of the more powerful producer. For example, the casting director of Spy Hard, Jackie Birch, told me that Joel Silver had better taste in actors than John McTiernan. And he was the one who wanted the sexy bad guys, and John McTiernan wanted the more traditional, thugs. And so as a casting director, she had to weigh in. And of course, casting directors are always pushing the envelope and being more innovative. And so Silver ended up getting his way, and that really started changing the way action movies were being made. I worked on many television shows for Aaron Spelling. So this is a really interesting situation where he is this, like, the 800-pound gorilla who just, everyone does whatever Mr. Spelling wants. And they sort of see everyone around you. It's crazy because everyone around us was like, oh no, that's not what Mr. Spelling wants. So everyone, like, they sort of filter everything through his vision. And as a casting director, we're always trying to fulfill his vision, but at the same time, try to have choices, because we're real. From a casting perspective, you want the director to have choices. Well, with regard to Spelling, the director didn't have as much power. In most TV episodic, the director does not have a whole lot of power. It's usually the showrunner who weighs in. But Mr. Spelling didn't even sit in on guest cast auditioning. So we had another producer who sat in for him and was sort of his point of view, which was very interesting. So so there are times when you have a producer who when they had the power and the vision, they could nudge more. Whereas someone like Fred Roos, who started in casting and moved up as a co-producer for Coppola in the Godfather movies, he sort of knew he had to sort of nudge things. And he talked about how you nudge things forward.
That's fantastic. I'm loving these ideas of problem solving and helping to set parameters and offer options to creatives and for solutions. One of my professors the other week, one of my favorite professors at school, Bob Zalk, who came from Disney, said something like, every day I went into work as a producer, I expected to face at least one major tragedy a day. And Evan, that kind of goes back to what you were saying about, stuff hitting the fan every day. And it can be such a stressful job when all that's coming at you. I want, just on a personal level, are there habits you had to learn or a mindset you had to adapt to get through all that and survive by the end of the week? I mean, I'm even feeling burnout right now, just from things. Are there ways you are able to say no at the end of the day, or prioritize, get through those hard, crazy problems?
I try and be stoic. I can change the ones I can change, and the other ones I'll figure out later. But I feel a producer oftentimes is the guy who gets out of the Humvee and steps on the IED, so the actors and the director don't get hurt. So that's my job, to take the heat. Evans, Josh's, Paul's. I mean, that's where we are. Back to the sandbox and stuff. It's our baseball field. Now the ball players can play.
Yeah, I think like one thing that I learned is just to stay even, and it's not so much. I don't know. For me, it's more of just like a life lesson. I remember my first kind of like gig that I had ever was I started selling DBC themed T-shirts at Viola to finance an internship out in France in 2011, and I got approval from Dr. Barry Corey's office, and I don't think he realized how hot they would become. I think it was pretty embarrassing for him just seeing his face on T-shirts everywhere, especially one with him in the short shorts holding a basketball, like over the LA skyline. But I went to France, and it was this incredible experience being at the Cannes Film Festival and meeting Kanye and like all these, like meeting all these people and just thinking like, wow, this is a crazy life. And then coming back for summer and like working at a sushi bar that was just miserable. And it was like this weird thing of like highs and lows of me coming off this wave feeling like, I don't know, Tom Cruise in Air Force One, and then just like coming back and just being like, what am I doing? What just happened? I was like literally on a yacht like a week ago, and now like someone's complaining about their nigiri. Like, what is happening? So it was this weird kind of like thing of just learning to stay constant and steady and even through the highs and the lows. And instead of like, I don't know, getting yourself too hyped up on like those exciting moments, which of course you need to learn to celebrate. It's the same thing, not letting the highs get you high, not letting the lows get you low. I mean, I remember thinking to myself, my first producer credit is going to be like an actual thing. And so my wife told me, like, hey, for every producer credit you get, we'll do like a really nice dinner somewhere where you want to go. And so I always wanted to go to Matsuhisa on La Cienega, which was the very first Nobu, where Chef Nobu Matsuhisa started. And then Bob De Niro and then Chef Matsuhisa started Nobu afterwards. So I wanted to go to the OG, this tiny little sushi counter. And I went and I was thinking to myself, like, man, this is going to be such a cool moment. I got my first producer credit and an associate producer credit on Elvis Nixon. And it was like this weird thing where like the before my drink was even sat down, I was already like freaking out going like, oh man, where's my next one coming from? How do I get a co-producer credit? And it was like this kind of a good freak out, I think, where it just made me realize like, I don't know, you have great things in the moments and horrible experiences in the moment, but you just got to learn to just stay steady and even and just navigate when you got the highs and the lows, just stay just flat through it all. And don't let the accolades get you too hyped up, and don't let the things get you too far down, because I mean, the world keeps turning. Another thing too, and I'm sorry, I'm droning on here. My wife's a pediatric oncology nurse at UCLA. I mean, she does bone marrow transplants and hangs chemo on children for a living. And if there's like one thing that just gives you point of view, it's coming home to that.
Really?
My last, I think, little meeting was that I just had. I was just telling the story about how Mudbound played in 2017 at Sundance, premiere to like the standing ovation in the Eccles, and seeing my name on its own card, you know, and coming off and then turning behind me and seeing 1,800 people giving it a standing ovation for 10 straight minutes. And it was just like a moment where I was just like bawling my eyes out, just like couldn't believe that I made it to this point, or like I never thought that I would have had something successful like this. And then getting a call from my wife a few hours later. I was in the after party. I saw her giving me whatever, a call, and I walk outside, you know, so excited to tell her how the movie played. Hollywood Reporter's already putting out Oscar buzz in the trades. And my wife, I answered the phone and she's crying. I was like, "What's wrong?" And she's like, "That kid that I've been sitting with on night shift for the past, 4 months, getting to know, just died." And it's like, you just realize it was truly important. Yeah. And just like, I don't know. I think from that point on, I just kind of realized, like, you hear this a lot in the business. I know all these people have, but it's like, we're not curing cancer here, guys. And that, like, honestly is such a good thing for me to realize, where if a movie falls apart, or if a movie does great or whatever, we're not curing cancer. Like, we're not. And it's at the end of the day, I've done really well with just realizing this is just a job. And there's so much more important things in this world than collecting statuettes. So much more important. So yeah, that's my lecture. Sorry about that for going long.
Sure, it's all about perspective to me. What Evan says is right, but I just can't take, maybe it's because I do so many projects each year, but I just can't take seriously people's nervous breakdowns on the set and problems. They hire me to be the guy who can steer the boat through the Titanic's iceberg, not to fall apart with everybody else. So all of us have to be calm and collected, because that's our jobs.
Paul, what does that look like for you when you and your company are churning out so much content so quickly?
Yeah, so I mean, everything's a little different. I think that sometimes it's pretty crazy how there's like a trickle down, so definitely if you're in a position of like producing or something that's a little bit towards the top, your whole like energy towards people, like if you're like being angry or your nervousness or whatever, like, I mean, I started, producing, like fully being, I was producing, I was the top of the chain as far as that was concerned. And then there was a director, and then nobody else above me really, other than like an EP or where the money's coming from or the label or whatever. So I was in the deep end pretty early, and I probably exuded a lot of stress because it was stressful. It was like, I knew we only had so much money. I knew because everything, if you're line producing or whatever, all of the elements that are in play, and it can be kind of scary with all these spinning plates, which one could fall and like that kind of stuff, so it really does, because I do, it's like, oh man, I'm crazy busy for 2 weeks. And then it's like, I have maybe like a little dip or something. Sometimes it rolls onto each other, but, just really finding, time for, just kind of like things that ground yourself. Like, you're going to church, you're fellowshipping with these people or whatever, you have another hobby, you're playing music, is something that I do. I think that like taking that time, and then like, this is really important, especially for the short ones, but definitely for the big ones, the longer term. I've done a couple of like feature PM jobs and stuff like that too, so I kind of understand the longer term as well. But like taking stock of each production, so you afterwards, there might have been a little, the DP blew up, but he's a friend, and like actually just talking to people, that's an important thing, that when you're working and it's a job can be a little hard to remember, but everybody's a person and every relationship's a real relationship. And, so, I mean, I've had some jobs where like, because I mean, I work very closely with some of these EPs, and then maybe we get a little too chummy, and then we're like, rah, kind of yelling at each other or whatever. So it can be really good to come back and be like, hey, we're friends. Maybe that was a little crazy. Maybe call out a friend, sort of thing. But because it can just roll into each other. So you kind of want to be like, okay, that happened. I acknowledge what happened. Taking responsibility, taking stock.
Yeah, those debriefs have been so helpful on our sets at Action, just to touch base with everyone and say, hey, what went well, what didn't, how can we get better on the next one, sort of thing. Josh, I'm assuming there's a lot of that in the VR space too.
Yeah, I think it's there's a lot of post-mortem that needs to happen for projects that are sort of trying to break boundaries, especially technologically. But yeah, I would say, producing in general, I think for me can easily become an addictive cycle. There are the highs and the lows, and sort of that variable reward system can be really nefarious and dangerous to mess with. And I think like everyone's been saying, being able to find a way to distance yourself and have your identity not rooted and grounded in necessarily the product of your life and your work, but in who you are within yourself and your community is really, really important. So yeah, I think that's the burnout is real. And it's just you kind of end up finding coping mechanisms as a necessity, at least for me. I think right now we've got close to there's 30 different things that we've got in different stages of production or in development that are being worked on. And so you end up having to adapt and create systems that work for yourself mentally to be able to organize the things that you need to do. I think the biggest challenge for me that I'm still working on is learning how to delegate well and to empower other people and to trust them. But to belabor the sandbox analogy a little bit more, I think there is this aspect of the producing job, which is, in order to keep that sandbox a fun, safe space, you're the one that has to get the pooper scooper and get rid of any, turds that are getting in the way. And you kind of have to be able to laugh at yourself a little bit. And for me, it's you can remove yourself in the moments where all hope is lost, everything is destroyed, the movie's over, those. I've never had a project where there hasn't been something like that. I've never known a hard drive not to fail. I've never known a grip truck not to break down, on 405 or whatever it is. But it's just, coming from the perspective of, this current catastrophe is a future war story, definitely helps too. I'm curious what Mark thinks. I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of fires.
What I think about what in particular?
Just about how you sort of manage the stress and damage control of when it comes to casting and producing and the egos that are all involved.
Well, I'm fortunate because God blessed me with patience. And I'm just telling anyone, if God blessed you with patience, fantastic. If God hasn't blessed you with patience, develop it. Find that little, spark of, and also bring a sense of humor to your work. Know when to use it, know when not to use it. But honestly, I'm in the room with people so much that you sort of, you sense the room and you get a feel for when to step in. And a lot of times everyone else does what I want them to do anyway. So I don't have to push too hard. I find that it's better when you try to sense, you try to figure out a way that other people think it's their idea and not worry about getting credit because when we were doing The Mask, I was the first person to audition Cameron Diaz in her lifetime. And, and just sort of sensing, wow, I think she could do this. And having that weird feeling, and then sort of feeling out how to get her to think I can do this, because she didn't think she could do it. And so it's you really understanding how to work with people and how to empower them, encourage them in whatever you're doing. You can really make a difference in the lives of people as well as the careers of people.
Yeah, hopefully any other younger students aren't too scared by this job, because it's a lot of fun too. And then there are so many cool ways we can touch people. So as we think about,
I think I need a Mark just calling me every morning for 10 minutes, just telling me I could do it.
That's what I need. You give me that call every morning too, please.
Yeah, I would subscribe to that podcast or Headspace app or whatever it is.
Well, with so many students watching this one now, what would you guys say to us as we're coming out of film school, coming out of a year of COVID that disrupted everything? What are some just general encouragements, or what are some practical steps we can do in the next couple of months or years to, if we want to, produce?
Well, my apologies to the ladies, but I always use a football analogy. As long as the running back has the ball, he has a chance to score. So his job's just not to drop the ball or to pick it up and keep running. And all those big brutes are the people trying to stop you. But as long as you look at that goalpost and hold on to the ball, you can score.
So I know that I was pretty freaked out before I graduated, at least internally, just because, I mean, I did this major that some people were like, oh, that might be a little crazy. Your family's poor. How are you going to make it? You're not from there. And just that whole situation. You can do it. It's the whole like Southern California economy is built on all of these kind of weird gig jobs and stuff like that. It might not sound like, oh, 9 to 5, it might become that, but the uncertainty is okay. Don't be concerned. But also on top of everything, like, oh no, COVID, like I've been working this whole time personally, and the jobs are there, and the industry is such a huge economic such huge economic importance that all the jobs are happening. Everybody's like waiting like at the corner until the thing's open. So the work's there. You're going to be graduating into, I think, a time where a lot of stuff's getting made. Personally, I have a friend that is also like more indies, and she has like 5 productions that now all want to happen when they were going to happen over a long period of time. So yeah, don't be too afraid. Is from what I understand. Anyway,
Paul, I remember you and I talking about 2014, 2013, where that panic was there. How do I get connect to this group? How do I connect to? I'm old people. I can tell stories about Josh and Paul.
Yeah.
What was that? 10 years ago?
Yeah,
8 years ago that we had those chats. Look at it now.
How it happens. It just kind of goes, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's like almost, we're up in the 10s almost.
Yeah, exactly.
It's messed up. That's really messed up.
But
Josh,
we're
you
surviving.
too. I remember some panic during Advent.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
There were so many panics.
Evan, I didn't know you there, but I'm sure you were panicking too.
Oh, it hasn't gone away.
Yeah, the panic doesn't. That's the most honest part. I wasn't sure if we were going to be that honest here, but that's the truth. No one knows what they're doing. The panic doesn't stop.
But we're doing what we want to do, and we're in film, and that's pretty incredible. I mean, I was this close from mowing lawns, which would have been fine too, and I've done a couple odd jobs, but it's like, that's what I was afraid of, and it didn't have to happen. I think it's a lot of commit and like put yourself out there, work really hard, be humble. Like if we're starting out, that's the biggest thing. I don't know how many people like PAs I've had on set, like kind of trying to finagle it too much, and then it just isn't, not everybody wants that, but you need to talk and be humble at the same time. You can talk to people, and they might need a hand here and there, and then you get hired. It's
I want to follow up on that. Yeah. I want to follow up on that because when I worked in New York for 2 years in casting, and I decided I had to move to Los Angeles and start all over. For the first year, I spent more time doing temp work just to keep myself, afloat, rather than working in the entertainment industry. And so many times people would be like, can we hire you? Can we hire you? And you sort of, at that time, I knew what my goal was, and I would say, no, I'm going to be doing working in the entertainment industry. And I just encourage students to not feel that you've failed just because you're working in an office to make ends meet while you're doing your day job in order to pursue, let's say, a 5-year plan. I mean, people make business plans, and sometimes it takes time for that business plan to come to fruition. And it never happens exactly how you plan it. So you have to be sensitive to it happening a little differently. And what was crazy was you were talking about, hey, talk to people. So I talked to my next door neighbors who just moved in the apartment next to me. And they were like, oh yeah, we just got out of college. We're going to be writers. I'm like, oh really? I'm going to be a casting director. And they got a job eventually and they needed help. And I gave them free help, free advice. And it ended up leading to my first job as a casting director because I was helping out some friends. It has so much to do with community, what we do. A friend of mine gave me a script and said, hey, I'd like you to read this. And I'm like, I'm really busy, but I will read it. I promise you I'll read it. 6 months later, I'm on my Christmas break. I take out the script, I read it. It's the most brilliant script I've ever read. I call him up. There's no director, no producer attached. And I'm like, I'm going to help you. I am going to help you get this movie made. And because I love it so much. And I just helped for years. I helped just get the movie off the ground. And it just ended up that Richard Attenborough came on board to direct it, and it actually got made. It's not as great a movie as the original script was, but still, I got to work with an Oscar-winning, director, and had that wonderful experience. And it all started as a favor to a friend that I wasn't saying, what do I get back from it? I was just saying, I will help you.
Yeah, I think how I kind of shot myself in the foot early on was being on The Butler while I was still in college and doing term papers and whatever from a producer trailer made me feel like I already kind of made it. And so I not necessarily made it, but I was like, I've been let in the door and they haven't kicked me out yet, right? And so that was kind of like my thought. And I didn't develop the relationships around me with the people that were also on my level of the playing field, I guess. And just kind of thought that, okay, I can do it on my own. I just keep working hard, keep my head down. But when I came back from The Butler and it's like everything got quiet in this business, it's a desert for a long time, and then it just starts dumping rain, and then it'll stop immediately, and then it's a desert again, and it's like, well, what the heck? I mean, I didn't go to bed until like 1 a.m. 2 nights ago because I was just so busy trying to get legal stuff together, and then I'm up early again, and then it's like today's been just like, I mean, with a few meetings here and there, but it's been breezy compared to that. It's like, wait, is this the same week? It's a very bipolar business, but I think, like I said, I shot myself in the foot where I came back from Butler. That movie was done. Our deal with Sony expired. We moved off the lot. And then like the producer I was working for, who now actually, Pam Williams, who's the president of Lee Daniels Television, she was trying to figure out her next thing before jumping over to Lee's office on the Fox lot. And like, I didn't have a place to go. And so that's where I was like, crap, what's my next move? I did not set myself up at all. And I did not make the relationships and maintain those as well as I should have during my time on The Butler. And then it was kind of starting back in square one. Yeah, I think it's this business is crazy. It's nuts. I really do feel like this past year, and like going back to the question that Andy asked, I feel like this past year has been just a giant hamster wheel. I feel like I've been running against the wind, or like in a swim spa, if you know what those are, where like you're just as fast as you can, just running, and you're just not getting anywhere. But I think we're a resilient bunch, at least us in this business. And things happen. I mean, it's like, as long as you keep pushing and you have the work ethic to back it up, something will happen, and that will lead to the next thing. And that will lead to the next thing. I don't know. It always works that way, but it's always just deserts and storms, and there's nothing in between. There's nothing else differently. And I think I'm going to say one more thing. There's this stupid saying that like I love, and it's derived from like an FDR quote from way back in the day. But it's calm seas never made great captains. And I always tell myself that it's like just all the BS you're dealing with on a daily basis and how difficult this business is. I think just continues to push me and make me realize I'm becoming better at what I do because of the hardship.
That's great. We got a few minutes left, and I'd love to ask a couple student questions we got in advance as a way to end. So Ben asks, I'm in a place where people are asking me to produce a lot of different things, and it's really exciting. But how do I prioritize those, and how do I say no without breaking those relationships?
You know, if you feel like you have sort of a calling or an idea of the sort of stories that you want to tell and create, then there are things that sort of pay to that effect, right? I think it's really hard, and I think especially sort of the upbringing that I have, yeah, I definitely have. I've had to really work on some of my people-pleasing tendencies, and I'm in a position where I literally have to pass on multiple projects a week in some cases, and that's you're gonna have to learn how to do that. You're gonna have to learn how to say no, otherwise you're not going to be able to say yes. You gotta, like, turn down the good things for the great things, and that's really hard to do, but it's a self-evaluation. I think, and I'm preaching to myself right now because I very much struggle with this, but it's sort of identifying the things that are fulfilling the, what are the stories that you're trying to tell? What are the things that that are sort of like the undeniable thing, like, oh, this is so exciting, I gotta be a part of this, into a place where you're not going to spread yourself too thin and not be able to service any of the things that you're working on.
If there's student films, which one's the most challenging or the most fun?
Yeah, because I mean, you do want to figure out what the project will do. If you really believe in something, like, oh man, this could be really cool, like I will be proud of showing people this. That's usually a good indication. I also just have like a certain, because I take a lot of little jobs, which I think would actually kind of mirror some of the student landscape, because your project might be 1 to 10 minutes or something like that. So I sometimes it's first comes first serve, and then I just try and honor that. It's like if I'm into the project when it's presented to me, and then somebody else comes up with something else, and I know that I can't do it, then I have to say no, unfortunately. And I remember at Biola, it was a little hard to find producers, because it's a role where if you're not being paid for it, it's can be a little unforgiving. You don't have the, always, especially in a student range, it's not always like, oh, I directed that, I produced that, might get a little less of a cheer, so.
Josh did a great job on Abbott Ventura with that feature, though, as the producer.
No, it's so huge. Yeah, I think that so many people end up producing their own things because they can't, and they're directing and producing, and then it comes out worse for it. So I think that I would encourage you so much to be a student producer, because it'll make the projects better. It'll make them way better, because I don't know how many times it's like somebody's trying to shoot it and they're carrying this and they're calling the person, and you can't focus on the creativity. Like having somebody to manage that will make a better project, and you have to understand, that's really a huge gift, and you're going to make something better.
I had asked someone early on, when I was right before I went to Biola Film School, there was like a Q&A of some like indie film in like Oakland when I was growing up there. And it was like literally a month before I came down to Biola. And I asked the director afterwards, I said, I'm going to film school in a month. Do you have any advice for me? And like his advice, like still, he hasn't made a movie since, and no one knows who he is, but like it still stays in my head every day, and it's just swing at every pitch. That's what he said. So I feel like when you're starting out, you have to swing at every pitch until you're at a point where you can start choosing which pitches that you don't have to swing at.
And
so if you're,
I was going to say, when the ball that you hit is going to be your future career. Are you going to be a set PA or an office PA? That's a big decision, because that's career setting. And if you do 2 or 3 office PAs, you're never going to go back to set PA. You're going to be my new line producer or my new UPM. And that's your goal, production coordinator. So kind of pick the choices too.
Someone once gave someone advice, and I thought it was really good advice, which is, when you move to Los Angeles, people are going to say, hey, come over to Venice. Hey, could do this. And this is just socially. the first 2 years, you'll find you'll go, sure, I'll do that. And you go all over the place. And then after 2 years, you start and say, you know what? I'm going to have to pick and choose. And I think that it's very similar to the entertainment industry, where you, as Evan said, you swing at every pitch. And then at a certain point, you can go, okay, now I'm just gonna, I'm gonna pick and choose. I'm gonna wait for that pitch that I hit the best, and to utilize my time. Or if I say my mission is this, I want to do this. This is my mission. Companies have missions. This is my mission. And you go, that would be mission driven. I'm going to do that. And sometimes it's not the material. Sometimes it's the people I get to work with. I can touch their lives. And so you start being just more selective. And you just sort of use your intuition about how you become selective after a certain point. So it's really a journey of that starts in saying, sure, I'll help. And then at a certain point, you start being a little more selective.
I think that's going to be a great place to wrap this up. And thank you all for joining us and giving us an hour of your day to share with all the festival goers and everyone else attending the festival. We're looking forward to seeing you at the Mixer at 1 p.m. today. So have a great time watching the films, and have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.